Okay, this is the first of two podcasts I'm going to do for your Unit 2 test review. This podcast is going to focus on the image-based multiple choice questions and then on the short essays. Basically, your AP exam will open with around 36 multiple choice questions, and these in turn will be based on a series of 4 images. Some of them will be double images with 7 to 9 questions per image or pair of images. You'll have 20 minutes to complete this part of the exam. Your unit exam is going to have 4 images or pairs of images as well, somewhat fewer questions, and we've allocated 15 minutes, which I think will be plenty. So in other words, the College Board assumes that you're going to take approximately 30 seconds per question with a little time left over to study each new set of images. In practice, I think you'll find that some questions you can answer in 10 seconds, and some you'll still be puzzling over 2 minutes later. Our unit exams, I hope, will help prepare you for these questions, and in fact, the images and multiple choice questions that you'll see on the first part of your Unit 2 exam and also on the third part will all be from actual AP tests. Sometimes the images I've put on the exam are slightly different from the ones you would see on the exam or in the book, since I couldn't find the exact image on the internet and the College Board images are password protected. But at any rate, the images you'll see will be close enough. You are not going to have any big surprises on your unit test because I'm about to show you the images you'll see. On the actual test in May, you may be surprised or baffled or alarmed, terrified. I'll be honest, as I prepared this exam, I was startled by one of the past questions. It did not show up on the list of must-study image I'd received in my AP Teachers course, and I thought they'd given me all the images that had shown up on past tests. Well, oops. At any rate, I'm going to start with that image, which will, yes, appear on your Unit 2 test. Actually, I think it's a great illustration of how you can use what you already know to figure out an image, even if you don't immediately recognize what it is you're seeing. So, what are we seeing here? So here I am thumbing through past AP exams looking for questions that would fit this unit, and I come on a series of image-based questions based on this reconstruction drawing. Yes, it is in your book, page 46. As I think I told you back at the beginning of the class, there has actually never been an AP art history image that was not in Gardner's History of Art, Gardner's Art Through the Ages, which is one of the reasons we use that textbook. In fact, we also studied this site, or to be specific, we looked at a couple of pieces of art from this site, which I think you'll remember quite well. We looked at them in some detail. However, I didn't show you this drawing or focus on it, and I'm guessing that you don't immediately recognize it. Now, some of you may. Don't answer right away, because I want to see if together we can use the clues in the image to help you figure out what this is probably showing. Now remember that when you see an image, you will see 7, 8, or 9 questions, and at least one of those questions is likely to ring a bell with you and say, well, that's got to be such and such a place. Do people still watch or play Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? What I'm really suggesting is that you become gumshoes. Use the image you have and the questions to see if you can figure out what the College Board is asking. So looking at this slide, there's one distinctive building here. It's actually a little hard to see, but it's near the top and slightly to the left. And it looks unlike all of the other shapes. It stands up. It's pretty clearly the tallest building in the picture. So what is it? There are 2 likely candidates. You see that it's stepped. You know it's the ancient Near East. It's going to be either a step pyramid or a ziggurat. So if the picture were enlarged and focused on this spot, you'd be able to tell. How? Well, you'd look for a cella on top. You'd look for the temple. Remember that step pyramids are tombs, ziggurats are temple platforms. In this case, it looks like there's something on top. It's hard to tell. We really don't get a clear enough clue. But are there any other clues? Basically, this is likely to be either a mortuary complex, if it's a step pyramid, or some kind of a governmental or palace complex, if it's a ziggurat. Remember that the step pyramids were the earliest true pyramids, and you've seen drawings of the complex. It's on page 61. You should take a look at it again. And by the way, I would note that the step pyramid shows up all the time on the AP tests, and I'm going to cover it in my second review podcast. But looking at this, I would say it's too big to be a mortuary complex. It's bigger even than the huge temple complexes of the New Kingdom, and we all know that pyramids are from the Old Kingdom, right? All pyramids are Old Kingdom. So, assuming that funny-shaped stepped building is a ziggurat, that means this is from somewhere in the ancient Near East, and then we have to ask ourselves, well, which civilization is being portrayed here? Now, it may be, of course, that the College Board will give you a break. You look at the multiple choice answers to where it's from, and only one of them is from the ancient Near East, and bingo, you've got your answer. But it might not. So one thing you can think about ziggurats, you're probably immediately thinking Sumer. But if you remember the picture of the ziggurat of Ur that Saddam Hussein had rebuilt, you'll realize that this isn't it. It's squatter. It's not as obviously stepped. It has stairs going up. So we're probably looking at something other than Sumeria, which leaves you with Acadia, Assyria, Babylonia, and Persia, although Persians don't have ziggurats, so we'll cross them off the list, and actually we're going to get to the Persians. This is a huge complex anyway, and the Sumerians had relatively small city-states, so that's another argument that it's probably not Sumer. So we're probably looking at one of the Near East's empires, either Assyria or Babylon. And at this point, you've probably guessed the answer because only one of the AP answers will make any sense. If you did happen to have a choice between Babylon and Assyria, and actually the College Board doesn't usually do that to you, then what you should do is take a look at the other questions and see which civilization it's probably representing. If you see a question asking about the Ishtar Gate or law codes, you're probably looking at a complex from Babylon. If the questions are asking about the Lamassu or lion hunting scenes, then you're probably looking at a complex from Assyria. And I'm going to give you the answer in this case. Assyria it is. Specifically, this is a reconstruction drawing of the Citadel of Sargon II, which is figure 220 in your text. And yes, you are going to want to read and study that description in that passage now that you know it's on the test. Of course, you're not going to get that kind of warning on the AP exam. And frankly, you're not usually going to get that much warning from me. When we get to Greece and Rome in the next unit, there are a very large number of AP questions based on images. And I'm going to give you all the images that the College Board has asked multiple questions on. And then you're not going to get all of them on the test. So I guess be forewarned. I'm also not going to tell you all the questions that come with this image. Now that I've told you the image, I've given you a huge break. But here are some things to think about. So where is Assyria anyway? I don't have an Assyria on my globe. So maybe today it has a different name. What about Persia, by the way? I don't see a Persia either. Does it have a different name? That's a question that could come up on an AP test. How is this complex organized? I'm really talking about architectural style here. And I'm going to give you a hint. Oh, you'll find the word you need in the passage about this description, about this reconstruction drawing. But notice that it's constructed in a series of squares and rectangles with open spaces in the middle. Is this a tomb, a funerary or mortuary complex, or some kind of governmental center? What kind of art would you find in this kind of structure now that you know that you're talking about Assyria and Sargon II? What functions would that art serve? Remember the key questions in this unit. One is, how are sacred spaces indicated in a work of architecture or in a work of art for that matter, and how is power and authority conveyed in art? I think if you focus on those questions, and particularly on power and authority, since this is Assyria, you'll be on the right track to answering questions correctly. Okay, dates, ugh. The College Board will ask some dates, and they are especially likely to ask dates from these very early periods. You're covering vast periods of time, and they want to know if you have any sense of where in the long BCE period you might be talking about. Now, I've given you a series of dates here. Some of them you're going to need to know for the test, either for this section or for the follow-on multiple choice section. I'm not going to repeat it if it's coming on in the next section. I'm mentioning it now. A wicked teacher that I am, I'm not going to tell you which of these dates you need to know. But note that I've given you just one date. even though usually, of course, we're talking about fairly long periods of time. I mean, Old Kingdom Egypt, for example. This was advice from my AP instructor. He thinks you need to go into the test armed with dates that fall more or less in the center of a period. In other words, you don't need to remember that a particular Italian Renaissance Madonna is 15 something or other. But you will need to know generally when the early and middle Italian Renaissance is, when the high Renaissance Mannerist period is. Those are all treats in store for you. And here are the dates that I think you should keep in mind for the ancient Near East. I will give you more dates each unit, and then we'll review all of these dates at the end, and you can consider that, I guess, a promise or a threat, depending on how you look at it. And again, remember that these will be multiple choice questions, so you'll have a fighting chance. Usually one or more of the dates will clearly be wrong. Okay, remember Funny Headdress Lady. She is another popular AP subject, shows up on more than one exam. And so even more is the entire period that she represents, which is, I'll let you all fill in the blank on that. I think you know, you just did a short essay on it. So who is this lady? How was this work made? And remember that there will be questions about cultural context, about identification, and about I used the phrase before, formal analysis. What are techniques were used to make this work? What is it made of? What are the materials? You also need to be prepared to answer questions about the function that the work of art served. And I'll give you a hint. In Egyptian art, the function is always pretty much the same. What are the most important facts about her period? What's it noted for? Who are the leading players? What are the stylistic features of this period? And the fact that it has such distinctive stylistic features is one of the reasons I suspect that the College Board loves to ask questions about this. I don't know why my Skype screen suddenly showed up. I don't know if it'll show up on the YouTube podcast or not. At any rate, this work is all over the AP test. It shows up not only in your image-based questions, but it also shows up in your regular multiple choice questions. Here's a hint. If you see several questions that really maybe even seem kind of repetitive about the same work of art, that tells you that I found a question about this work of art in more than one AP test that I have. In other words, that's something that appears repeatedly. It's a work of art you need to know, or a subject that you need to know. So about this work of art, I'm going to raise the same question. Who are these people? How was this work made? Again, materials, techniques. What function did this work of art serve? What event did it commemorate? What stylistic conventions do you observe? And again, this is a very, very important piece of art from the ancient Near East. It's one of the centerpieces of the Louvre Museum. It's one you need to know. Another place. This isn't a reconstruction drawing. It's an actual photo. And this is a place that we talked about. And you saw something similar to these photos. Again, these are not the exact photos in the book or in the exam. You want to check out pages 50 and 51. And note that the AP exam actually uses a slightly different work than appears in the book. With all of that, where are we? I hope you know that we were in Persia, or at least you know now. So you have the advantage of knowing that this has to be the ancient Near East, since that's your current unit. On the actual AP test, you wouldn't be so lucky, and I think it would actually be possible, and you'll see this more clearly after the next unit, to look at this and think that this is somewhere in ancient Greece. On the other hand, the king on the bottom right should look Eastern to you, and if you're lucky, you'll recognize him as Darius. So yes, this is indeed Persia. So what kind of a site is this, and how did it function? One hint for answering questions in general in this unit: if it's Egypt, it's almost certainly a funeral or mortuary site. That's where they spent their money. That's where they put their emphasis. In the ancient Near East, you're more likely to see a temple or a palace complex. Now, of course, you can see temple complexes in Egypt too, but they're usually mortuary temples. So the tricky part here is identifying the function of this particular structure. And it's tricky in part because, frankly, I didn't focus on this very much in my talk. I went through Persia fairly quickly, probably, I think now too quickly. And in particular, I don't think I included the term Apadana in my podcast. And I noticed, I went back and checked, that it's not a vocabulary word on the study guide. It will be after this. That's my mistake. And by the way, that should be a warning to you. You may feel as if the study guides I give you have everything that's in the textbook and then some. But in fact, I make decisions about what to leave out, and they're not always going to be absolutely right. Now, when I get ready for the next unit, I'm going to spend more time going back through these AP tests again. So you should know what an apadana is and what function it served. I'm going to give you another hint. That word is not actually used in this AP question. But if you know what that is, then you'll have an idea of what's going on. Okay. What kind of reliefs are these? Now, you need to know the difference between bas and sunken relief for your multiple choice questions as well. And in fact, understanding relief technique is important. What materials is this carved into? What symbols do you see? What's happening in the picture on the left? And by the way, this is not the same as the photo in the book or the photo on the exam, but the caption in your book explains what's happening, and it fits together. So how and why would these friezes have looked different back in Darius's day is another question. This is going to be an important question when we get to Greece and Rome, and we've talked about this. What would they have had that they don't have in these pictures? And finally, I did talk about this in my podcast, but I talked about a lot of things in my podcasts. What other civilization is influencing this Persian art? I'll give you a hint. It shows up especially in the clothes, and you can see that more clearly in the image in the book. So again, you want to go back and revisit those images. Okay, now we get to the third part of the exam. I'm skipping over the second part. That's the other review podcast I'm going to prepare. So this is the 5-minute essay. They actually no longer do 5-minute essays, but I'm going to consider it a 5-minute essay for the purpose of this test and grade it again using the College Board rubric. You should recognize this and remember that in these slide-based short essay questions, the first part of the question is always fully identify. You want to say as much as you can about what this work actually is, and they're not going to use minor works for that reason. So, how was it made? Where was it found? What function did it serve? And by the way, you don't usually need to know what museum it's sitting in now because these artifacts are, for the most part, scattered all over the world. The College Board is not going to ask you to memorize, what's in Paris and what's in New York and what managed to stay in Cairo. How does this work of art reflect its culture? How does it reflect its culture's values and practices? And just what's happening in this? What narrative is being told? Because this is very much an example of narrative art. Okay, notice the theme here. Both of these are Egyptian. These are the short essay topics. Now, they actually had a short essay also on the Stele of Hammurabi. Since we've got so many other questions about that, I spared you that particular question. Here again, what is this work? You need to fully identify. And by the way, the College Board will let you get away with not giving an exact title. Of course, this work didn't have an exact title. We just know what it looked like on the tomb. But you're going to need to fully identify. And remember, by the way, that since this is a 10-minute essay, in general, you're going to want to say more. The College Board grading rubric about things you could talk about, and this goes on for a page and a half of small single space type. And it's all going to be reproduced into your exam for you to look at after you take the exam, in fact, the next day. So what is this work? What is its cultural context? What function did it serve? What's happening? Again, we see something of a story here. What stylistic conventions do you observe? And, a hint here, even if you see an Egyptian piece, they're usually very obvious. It will be one that's been in your textbook. Maybe you don't remember it all that well. There is still a whole lot you will be able to say because you know about Egyptian art, but never make the mistake of not describing the specific work. If you don't remember its title and you can be descriptive enough, particularly for these older works of art, you're usually going to be okay. And then there are the usual formal analysis questions. How was it made? What was its function? Where would it have been found? Good luck, and in my next podcast, I'll talk about your general multiple choice questions.